Let's bring in our guest here. Needs really no introduction. Covers the Detroit Lions for Pride of Detroit. Shout out to him, man, for joining the program as well. But Jeremy Reisman, Jeremy, what's going on?
What's up, fellas? How we doing?
We're doing good. Just having a lot of partially brain dead conversations about John Gruden as OC. But Jeremy, I want to ask you to kind of start off here. Your reaction, because I am interested in your opinion. I know you guys have been probably pumping out articles about it too, but the new defensive line coach and kind of what went behind that. I know, he's got ties to Dan Campbell, Bill Parcells, and he's highly regarded, but what do you make of the hire?
Yeah, no, I think anytime you're kind of poking from a Todd Bowles defense, you're probably picking a good fit, a strong candidate, and a guy who has a pretty big track record of producing young, strong defensive line talent. We heard last year, when they traded for Carlton Davis, how he made such a strong impression in his game against the Lions. And you think about all 3 games against the Buccaneers in the past 2 years or so. And that defense has been one of the few defenses that has given the Lions some problems. And I would say it probably starts with that defensive line. It's always, they've always had a really strong run defense in Tampa. So I think that was probably the initial attraction. We know that the Lions want to stop the run first. But you look at guys like Vita Vea, you look at guys like Kalijah Cansey, those guys were also their leading sack getters this year. And so getting a little interior pressure in 2025, I think would carry this Lions defensive line and really whole defensive unit. That's something they've really been missing for a very long time. If they can get that out of him this year, that could do wonders.
Yeah. Hey, Jeremy. Hey, first off, hope you had a great season. Off season now, so it's still busy for everyone. But I do want to ask, obviously, the big news, the DC and the OC. The first one I want to talk about, though, is just the defensive coordinator position. Larry Foote today. I just want to get your thoughts on the way you think the Lions will approach it, because we've been on this train of we would love here at least to get a kind of a vet or an experienced DC in the building to keep this defense going, obviously with the Super Bowl roster. What are your thoughts? Do you think they go kind of a rookie defensive coordinator, or do you think Dan looks like a Dennis Allen or someone with some more experience going into next year?
Yeah, I think they're at least going to see if they can get some of those veteran guys, or at least have conversations with them. I think Dennis Allen is a guy that if they haven't already called, they're going to call at some point, just because there's the obvious connection there. The biggest thing I came away from Dan Campbell's presser this week is we don't really want to change all that much. We want to kind of be who we are. We kind of have our identity set. It's just a matter of getting a really good teacher in that philosophy. And obviously Dennis Allen is going to have a lot of overlap philosophies of Aaron Glenn, considering how long they work together. So I think that makes sense. It could also be an internal guy for sure. Obviously Kelvin Shepherd has kind of been the big name there. But to me, I do think the Lions defensive staff is relatively young. And I would like to see them tap into some of those guys that have a little bit more experience next year. It might not make a guy like Kelvin Shepherd too happy to see someone jump him like that. But again, I do think Kelvin Shepherd is he's a little young. Like he only has 6-ish years of coaching. It might not even be that many years. So it's early for him to get a defensive coordinator gig. And in my opinion, at the same time, though, you hear Aaron Glenn talk about him, and you hear Aaron Glenn say, we've been mentoring him. He thinks about the game exactly like I do. And that's going to be appealing to Detroit. So I think they're going to have to make a tough decision. Is he ready for that jump? Is he ready for play calling duties? There's a lot that goes into it. It's not just a matter of knowing the scheme front to back. It's managing an entire defense on game day, which is an entirely different process. So it would be a significant jump for him. I think he's going to get serious consideration for that, but I'm with you. I would like to see them go a little bit outside of their comfort zone. Not that Dennis Allen is necessarily out of their comfort zone, but at least throw their hat into the ring of some of those more experienced guys, because I think the Lions could use it.
Do you have just a random name? I threw out Rex Ryan a couple days ago. Do you have someone off right field that you're like, that don't be shocked, but be shocked a little bit?
No, I haven't done a ton of research on that, just because there's so much going on in this final week. My guy Eric Schlitt wrote I think he had 10 or 12 defensive coordinators or defensive coordinator candidates. I would recommend going over there. That's right. But yeah, I mean, it looks like Robert Saleh's going back to the 49ers. That would have always been an interesting one. But I tend not to throw my hat into some of these guessing games. I'm more interested in doing research on the guy they eventually pick.
Yeah, that's fair. Go ahead, Klotz.
And Jeremy, you were kind of just talking a second ago about needing to get outside of their comfort zone, and obviously coaching situations going on right now, but we're going to hit free agency sooner rather than later. And when you look at Brad and you look at how he's kind of attacked free agency and the draft as well, do you think he needs to go kind of into more of a win now mindset? Just because when you look at the history of the NFC specifically, when you look at who's going to be expected to win the NFC this year, the Philadelphia Eagles this offseason, they made a win now move acquiring Saquon Barkley. They're probably going to be in the Super Bowl. When you look at the last Super Bowl, the 49ers, they made win now moves in both Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams, even bringing guys in like Eric Armstead. You look at the Rams, Jalen Ramsey, Von Miller, OBJ, and then you go back to the Eagles again. That's when they brought in A.J. Brown. That's when they made the Super Bowl. So when you look at Brad, do you think it's time to make win now moves? Because even with draft picks, you're seeing Giovanni Manu, Sione Vaki, and there's guys that, they might not be the best, but they're guys that can contribute year one. Do you think there needs to be a kind of a flip of the switch here with Brad Holmes?
It's a good question. I'm going to answer a question you didn't ask, which is I don't think he'll do that. Whether he should or not is the question you asked. Whether I think he will, the answer is no. I don't think he will. I think he reiterated it today. They don't think it's time to think that the window is closing and you got to do something now. And they want to continue to have this sustained success. And that's through drafting and not necessarily wasting those draft picks on a 1 or 2 year move. But you laid out a compelling argument there, right? The reality of the situation is when you look at some of the extensions that they've made for guys that they've drafted already, you signed 3 big extensions last offseason. It's not going to hurt you much last year. It's not going to hurt you much this year, but all those cap hits take a huge jump in 2026. And that when people talk about a window closing or at least narrowing, that's what they're talking about is you won't have the cap space to make big splashes next year. You do have a relative amount of cap space this year. So I think there is a case to be made to make a big play like that. I haven't dug into the pool of free agency quite yet. I know a lot of people are already trying to get the Max Crosby train over here. That would be a pretty expensive move. I think his cap hits are in the 20 millions or salaries are in the 20-ish millions for the next 2 years. Because I did take a peek there just in case. But yeah, I mean, in general, I would rather have as many bites at the apple rather than going all in for 1 year, because you saw what happened with the Lions this year. They were the best regular season team in football, in my opinion, and they go one and done. That's kind of the nature of playoff football. You have one down day and it's over. Single elimination playoffs. You're not always going to get the best team to win the Super Bowl. So to me, I'm kind of more aligned with Brad Holmes thinks, which is just, hey, let's continue to keep building, keep this thing afloat. It might not be, we might not be making these huge, crazy moves to get this one guy in. But we have a good, strong roster from 1 to 53 and really 1 to 69 if you include the practice squad. And so we saw the importance of building that depth. If you go out and get a major player, who knows if he's going to stay healthy, and even if he does, you might not have the resources to build out the depth that they kind of had this year that allowed them to stay afloat as long as they did. And I think that gets you as many chances to stay in the playoffs, get in the playoffs year after year after year. And that's, to me, how you win a Super Bowl is you just give yourself as many chances as possible to get into the postseason. And I know you look at a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers and you're like, let's just not be that where we're making it every year, but we're not serious contenders. I think the Lions are doing a better job maintaining it. I think they're doing a better job drafting, which is key to kind of that sustained success. So I'm more of the Brad Holmes ilk of like, we don't have to throw all of our chips in now because we trust our process. We trust our drafting. We trust continuing to reload our young players on the roster, but it won't be easy.
Yeah, well, Ben Johnson dropped an absolute bomb this week on Lions fans. Went to the Chicago Bears, just threw up the middle fingers and left. Respect him, though. Respect him. You know what he tried doing, though? pulling Hank Fraley, but per source, a dentist, he will not be leaving. So what do you make of this OC job? Tanner Engstrand is the guy that I think all signs would kind of point to him. It's kind of similar. Ben was the pass game coordinator and then got promoted. I'm assuming Tanner will kind of go through that route. They haven't interviewed anyone like outside the organization. What's your kind of intel on that? Do you think it's going to be kind of a Tanner, Hank Fraley, Scotty Montgomery race? And out of the three, which way would you lean? Just personal opinion.
Yeah, I think you're barking up the right tree there. I think everything that Dan said earlier this week about their coordinator search really pointed to me that they were going to do an internal hire on the offensive side of the ball. It's a matter of having that relationship with Goff. It's a matter of the terminology wanting to be the same. Basically wanting to run the exact same offense with maybe just a little tweak here or there. And to me, there's no better candidate for that than your passing game coordinator in Tanner Engstrand. I think you hit it on the nail. He's kind of my leading candidate if I had to put money on it, which I wouldn't ever recommend doing. I would pick Tanner as the guy who I think is going to eventually get that job. One thing to note too is that the Lions are not going to be announcing their interviews like some other coaches do or some other teams do. I think most teams only do that for head coach and GM. I don't expect the Lions to announce any interviews that they're completing. So a lot of that process might be happening behind the scenes. We've seen it before in these past 4 years with those guys. Sometimes it's just an announcement. It's like, oh, we didn't hear anything about these interviews and the Lions just announced their new offensive coordinator. So, even though it might not seem like the Lions are doing a lot behind the scenes, obviously we got the Larry Foote report, but there might be reports out there that come out that no one hears about until they're hired. So they work in the shadows there. So just keep an eye out.
Yep.
I might have to start doing some of those like jet finders and see like Dennis Allen's jets
That's
or
right.
something. Or
Flight tracker,
like,
exactly.
Yeah, I might start doing that work for the people of Detroit. All right, I got a random question for you here, Jeremy, but I've been thinking about this week. And Brad actually, I don't know who it was that asked him the question today about essentially Carlton or not even him, but Giovanni Manu,
Yeah.
Jeff's guy, and then also Christian Mahogany. I want to ask you your thought process on the Mahogany thing, because I've been thinking about it all week. A lot of people obviously are on the side that Graham Glasgow didn't play that great, and then Kevin Zeitler, obviously, you need to re-sign him, but it sounded like today Dan or Brad is like, yeah, we want to get a deal done with him. Where do you stand on like the position you move into next year with Mahogany? Because it felt like he's played at a level to really, hey, he could definitely be a starting on this offensive line. He's the younger guy, and you can keep developing him and getting him in that role. Do you think they kind of look at that with Graham and say, we might just go with the younger guy, even though he has 2 years left on his deal? It still feels like maybe is that an opportunity for Mahogany to take over that position?
I think it'll be a competition next year. I really do. I don't think it's important to cut Graham Glasgow. In fact, I don't think it's financially responsible to cut Graham going into this year. Let's not forget, he is an absolute asset as a backup, right? He can be Frank's backup. He can be a guard backup like that. That is an important position to have. And so I think they probably go into next year, assuming they do something with the other side, whether it's re-signing Zeitler, which would be my preference, or maybe you draft a guy in the second or third or fourth round, or maybe you get someone else in free agency. I think they would be wise to make that a competition between Mahogany and Glasgow, but not just throw out the loser of that, right? I think you want depth there. Offensive linemen I think the Lions are actually pretty fortunate this year with their offensive line health, but you want that depth there. And yeah, I think you have to just remember that Graham is going to be an asset whether he's a starter or not. And I think he was pretty banged up this year, even though not necessarily in the injury report. I know he was banged up for a fact in the final game on Saturday. So probably wasn't his best year. It's also important to remember that he played right last year and was really, really good at right guard last year. And then they moved him to left guard this year, which he wasn't as good at. So maybe he wasn't at his best position, which is something else to consider. Like, maybe if Zeitler retires or doesn't want to come back, maybe Graham's at right and Mahogany's at left. Graham gives you a ton of options. So I would not throw out his contract just because of the down year that he had this year, because it's easy to forget how good he was the year before.
I did say earlier this week, I had mentioned like last year with Jonah Jackson, and he was like your sixth man. Like he was like your Jamal Crawford or Lou Will. And it was like anytime someone went down, it was Graham that stepped up to where I thought it was like an asset. If you do throw Mahogany in there next year at left or right, wherever you want, Graham is like if knock on wood, Frank goes down for a bit or someone that's like, I felt like that was a safer bet in my opinion. I know Graham's probably wants to start in that, but having him up there to be able to play center and all move around over Mahogany feels like an advantage in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt.
And kind of we just touched on the offensive coordinator and how it could look different. And I want to get more specific with it, Jeremy. When you look at no Ben Johnson now, what are like your confident, concerned? What's your outlook on Jared Goff next year now with no Ben Johnson?
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a wait and see situation. I'm of the belief that Ben Johnson had a major role in how successful that offense was, not just in terms of his play design or play calling or the trick plays and things like that. But if you ask anyone in that building, the how detail oriented he was, how specific he was in terms of route running. I mean, with every position on the field too, how the tight ends are running their routes, how they're blocking, where your arms are as a defensive lineman or offensive lineman, quarterback. Like he is so detailed on the mechanics of how every position works that you're going to miss that as a teacher for the young guys that are coming in. But I did think it was really interesting what Ben Johnson said about the Lions offense moving forward. And this was, I think, after his press conference when he was just meeting with the local media separately. He said like that is a self-powering engine now. Like they've gotten everything they needed from me. They're going to be fine. And it's a really nice thing of Ben Johnson to say. And I do believe it to some extent because the talent is there, right? And it isn't a young unit anymore. The wide receivers are starting to grow up. Jared Goff is a veteran. The offensive line is filled with veterans. You have a tight end who's entering year 3, a running back who's going to be entering year 3. You've got Dave Montgomery. It's a group that should know the ins and outs of this offense, even with a new offensive coordinator. So it does feel like they should be fine and good. And they've got 6 All-Pros on that side of the ball. So they've got the talent. But I think it'd be natural to expect at least a little bit of a step back. This was the number 1 offense in football. I think maybe there'd be natural regression even if Ben Johnson was still here. But I have a lot of respect for what Ben Johnson did for this offense. So, I would not be surprised to see it take a step back. Do I still think it's going to be a top 10 offense that could be a top 5 offense? Absolutely.
There you have it, Jeremy. We appreciate you. Although the season ended quite terribly, you guys are crushing it. So we appreciate it. And honestly, by the way, you never owe us. We love you. You keep up the great work, my friend. Keep up the great work.
Hey, you guys keep killing it too.
There you go. Jeremy Reisman.
Appreciate you, Jeremy.
Check him out. Follow him on Twitter as well, Detroit Online. Hey, what's going on there? It's Jeff Iafrate. Appreciate you for finishing the video. You can check out one of the videos here suggested or show support by commenting, liking, and subscribing. And buy your merchandise, FisherCTSports.com.